Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have another Mattel Jurassic World figure to take a look at, and this is a really exciting one if you ask me, because we have the Extreme Damage Allosaurus. I want to thank my good buddy Matthew who helped me pick this up a bit earlier than, waiting for it forever in my area. I tried to be a little bit patient, I really did. I tried to wait for it, but scalpers are horrible in my area, so even if it did come here, odds are I probably wouldn't find it. But again, a huge thank you goes out to him, and I will say this is easily the best Allosaurus that Mattel has released yet. However, the sculpt really doesn't appear to be too different compared to the older ones. The only thing I'm really noticing sculpt-wise that kind of looks a little bit different might be the slight difference in the curve at the end of the tail. But I did just have another Allosaurus in here with it a moment ago just to kind of confirm that it was the same sculpt, and it really does look pretty much exactly the same. So this is basically the same Allosaurus we've had prior, but in a much larger size and a nicer paint app, I think, because this time we have blue that runs all the way out onto the tail. Although we don't have as much color as I would like, we do have paint running out onto the tail, kind of far out onto the tail, and we also have painted nails on the feet, so there's some pluses. And as a whole, I'm very excited to finally have this figure after waiting for, pretty long time there for it to actually arrive, and unfortunately it never did, so I had to reach out to my friend to see if he had one in his area to just get a hold of one now rather than waiting again forever and never finding one. But anyway, I'm really psyched to take a closer look at this, so let's go ahead and do that right now. So I will bring in the other Allosaurus, the previous release of this, although it's not the coloration that's similar to this, it's the more brighter colored one that I have out currently, but I will show you again here in a few moments the exact similarities between the two figures. But I did want to, again, of course, as always, point out the differences between this and the other one, and that would, of course, be partially the action feature, but also the paint schemes. So as far as what you can see here on the face, we have a very dark blue up here on the top of the head, and then kind of like a light grayish sort of tone here for the lower jaw, almost like a kind of like a grayish tan sort of color. You can also see that we have the teeth painted very nicely with a nice off-white, and they also have a really nice gloss coat to them. The inside of the mouth sports that very nice pinkish tone there on the kind of skin flaps, but we have that really cool colored tongue. I love the fact that they include the kind of like bluish tongue on these Allosaurus figures. They've done it a few times now, I believe, and I really am a big fan of that. And it's very different than most Mattel figures. You don't really see that on too many, so it's awesome to have it here on the larger Allosaurus. You can also see that we have a really nicely painted eye with a yellow. It's hard to tell if that's an actual black pupil or if it's just the same dark blue that we have for the body, but overall it really doesn't make much of a difference because they're both very dark tones and look good regardless. Up here on the back of the Allosaurus, again, you can see that dark blue kind of splotching down here as we move down the course of the body, and then you can again see that same tone of color for the lighter tone down here. I'm kind of picking up on like some white splotches here and there, but they're not very abundant. I don't know if that was just like some sort of accidental painting, maybe from the teeth or something along those lines. But as you continue to move down, you can again see that the coloration kind of follows the same trend of the darker blue up here on the top, the lighter tone here for the bottom, but you also start to pick up on some of that kind of splotchy coloration. You can see it running down the entire course of the throat on mine. There's also a little bit of it here on the lower jaw, and that's something that Mattel has really been doing a lot lately, and I like the fact that they do it because it kind of gives the dinosaur a little bit more color variation, whereas a lot of the Mattel figures kind of don't really have much color. So it is a plus to have any sort of added coloration to the figures, and I think it also kind of adds a nice element of realism, kind of like some depth almost to the paint job. Like for instance, right here in the thigh, you can kind of see how there's like a lighter tone of that color here running down the thigh, down into the calf. You can even see it here on the opposing leg. Same deal with that sort of tone of color over there, but then it's a little bit darker here. Again, that kind of splotchy coloration I really like. You can also see the darker blue that's up here on the top, kind of running down here into the thigh as well. And you can see again that same style of that kind of splotchy coloration all throughout the course of the stomach. We don't, unfortunately, have painted nails on the hands, which I feel like is a little bit of a downside, especially when we have painted nails for the feet. But it really definitely would have been nice to have them painted just to add that extra bit of flair to our figure. And then again, as we move down through the course of the leg, you continue to kind of see that splotchy lighter blue throughout. You can even see it running down here into the ankle. And then again, the nails are painted with a black, very nice glossy black. We actually have the coloration on the underside because sometimes they skip that. But of course, we don't have paint for the dew claw. Mattel absolutely hates the dew claw. But as we move back out here again into the tail of the Allosaurus, you see that blue, that darker blue kind of continue to run out onto the tail. You can kind of see some of that lighter tone creeping through a few different areas of the darker blue, but it does transition away here pretty abruptly as we reach out here about halfway into the tail, and then you have nothing out here. But because of the fact that it does run out onto the tail pretty far ways there, it actually doesn't look bad. Kind of looks like, again, the entire figure is painted, which we sometimes don't have that appearance to the Mattel figures. Sometimes it looks like only half of the figure is painted, but this one does kind of have the appearance of being fully painted minus the nails. You can again see here for the underside, we have some more of that kind of splotchy blue showing up in certain areas. You can see it as you lead out the length of, even here on the underside of the tail and everything. The opposing side looks pretty much the same, of course, as what we had just seen on the previous side. The paintwork looks just the same there on the face, as the majority of the upper part of the head is all that dark blue, and then you have the lighter tone for the lower jaw. Really nicely painted eye with, again, that very nicely placed black pupil. It's definitely a black pupil. I can really quite easily see that here on this side. And then as we continue to, again, run along the course of the figure, you see how we have that kind of darker blue running down, and then some more of the kind of splotchy blues and stuff here and there. You see a lot more of the lighter tone on this side, whereas the other side had a lot more of the kind of mixing darker blues. This side has a lot more of the, lighter tone running up here into the stomach, while still continuing to have that kind of splotchy lighter blue. And then you can see more running down into the thigh. Again, the really nice looking paint for the nails. Absolutely gorgeous sculpt on this Allosaurus. There's no doubt about that. And then you lead out the length of the tail. I kind of feel like, of course, the tail's shorter than it should be, but it kind of looks a little bit longer on this one for some reason than it does on the older Allosaurus figures, even though I had compared them just before and it didn't really seem like there was too much of a difference, but I don't know why. It just kind of looks a little bit longer in this one. Then we have the extreme damage feature, of course. You can push that open, and we now have the rib cage showing, as well as, I guess, we have some sort of internal organs potentially in there, and you can actually pull this up and then get a look at the inside of the dinosaur painted with a really nice pink. Not really any kind of like blood effect like you've seen on a lot of the extreme damage figures, but it works really nicely and is very cool as well. Again, I love the extreme damage figures for sure. You do have the DNA scan code up here. So there is the code to add the Allosaurus to your collection. It's not super visible on this one, although of course it could always be better. You can definitely see it there, but because it kind of follows along the ridges, it's not as noticeable as some others, but still a little bit of an eyesore. And then you actually have a button back here to activate an action feature, and that action feature is a roaring sound effect and of course jaw snapping. Now it's not giving it to me. Come on, where are the others? Give me some more noises! There we go. Okay, so apparently it doesn't work perfectly, but it does work. And I like the fact that the mouth stays closed. You push the button and it opens the mouth, unlike a lot of the older Roarivores where the mouth was open. You push the button and it closes the mouth. I like it a lot better like this. But if I can go grab the other Allosaurus, you can immediately see a very big size difference between the two. But you can also see again that as far as the detailing aspect goes, the head sculpts are exactly the same. There is absolutely no difference. One dead giveaway, I think, is the detail there around and under the eye socket area. It's exactly the same. And as I continued to run through the figure, like you can see, the arms are the same, the legs are the same, the positioning of the legs are the same. But one of the dead giveaways for this obviously being the same sculpt would be like the positioning of the scars. You can see the scars in the stomach region. Scars in the stomach region. You've got scars here on the thigh. You've got the scars there on the thigh. Same deal right there on the tail, right in. I'm smacking things, but right in this spot, you have that same area of scars for that. There are only two other big-time differences that I've noticed between the older sculpt and the newer sculpt, one of which is the positioning of the tail. So you can see straight away in the newer one, the tail's not quite as curved as the older one. The older one had a much sharper curve. But another thing you might be able to pick up on immediately is the fact that you can really take note to here up above is the fact that the newer one has a lot more kind of like scoots running along the back. We have the line of ridges, which you do see on the older one, but they don't run all the way out onto the tail, whereas they do on this one. And then you kind of have like osteoderms or like scoots that run along the ridges here on the newer one, which you don't have on the older ones, so well, not exactly the same size. Again, they don't follow along the same area as I move them back together, but you can see there is a difference to the back of the dinosaur, which I didn't initially notice until I actually brought them back up here again. But I think that's really the only true difference between the newer one compared to the older one sculpt-wise would be, of course, the size, the armored kind of a look to the back, and then the positioning of the tail. But this is an absolutely awesome Allosaurus from Mattel. Now, as far as articulation on the new Allosaurus goes, we have a tiny bit extra than what you see on the older one. So, of course, you have the articulated jaw, the upper and lower jaws. You can see both move. You also have the arm articulation forward and back and out away from the body. Of course, it can swivel if you choose to. Then you have technically articulation here with the extreme damage area, but I don't know that I'd really consider that much articulation. You do have the hip articulation forward and back, as well as out away from the body. But one area the older Allosaurus that we were just taking a look at did not have articulation is the ankles, whereas you do have that articulation here on this larger version. And then the tail, which can go left, down, up, right, and swivel, so a good bit of articulation for the tail as well. And then just to give you another shot of the action feature here with it kind of at a distance. So definitely works very nicely. As far as a size goes, for a length from the tail to the snout, you are looking at about a little over 17 3/4 inches or approaching 18 inches, very, very close, or around the 45.5 centimeter area. And then for a height to the top of the crest of the Allosaurus, about 6 inches, pretty much on the dot, or a little over 15 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Peppa T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our newest Allosaurus, the extreme damage version, and you can really see that there is a massive size difference between this one and everything else that you see, and of course a massive size difference between this and the older Allosaurus from Mattel. So to further show you that, there is the older Allosaurus next to the newer Allosaurus. So by now, if you are a Mattel collector, odds are you probably have one of the older Allosaurus figures. At some point, you probably would have purchased one. They were all that same similar size, of course, that Roarivore, Roar-Attack size range. And you can see again how big the newer one is compared to the older one. Makes the older ones honestly look like juveniles compared to this massive new extreme damage Allosaurus. I think this is probably right here the most impressive size comparison that you could probably get, is just how much bigger the newer one is compared to the older ones. And then for another size comparison, there is our extreme damage Allosaurus next to the epic roaring Tyrannosaurus Rex. This, I think, would definitely show you that the Allosaurus, although really quite large, doesn't quite compete with the Mattel Tyrannosaurus. It's definitely a bit smaller than our T-Rex figures are. And then for one final comparison, this is another one that I felt like was probably a pretty good one to have. We have the extreme damage Allosaurus next to one of the Mattel Stegosaurus, so you can get a pretty good idea again how the two classic mortal enemies here would size up against each other with the Allosaurus and Stegosaurus. So this brand new extreme damage Allosaurus is far and away the best version of an Allosaurus that Mattel has released quite yet. Definitely a very, very big step up in, I think, of course, the size, but just the overall beauty of the figure. First of all, we have painted nails, and that's always a great thing. Anytime you have painted nails, it just amps up the beauty of the figure by a mile. But the fact that the paint runs so far out onto the tail, not all the way, but pretty far out onto the tail, is really, really awesome. The only thing I think the figure is kind of missing would be some sort of alternate tone of color, because a lot of figures that we get, we usually have like 2 tones of color and then like the primary body color. So like we'll usually have like 2 different tones of color on the top. Like maybe we'll have like one shade of color for the face and then a different shade for the body. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but you know, a lot of the time I feel like that's usually how it goes when it comes to the Mattel paint schemes. But this time we only really have just the dark tone of blue and then the alternate tone of color, the lighter tone for the body. We do have that kind of splotchy blue throughout, but it almost looks like it's the same tone of blue as far as what the dark blue is at the top, but just applied differently and applied a little bit lighter. So again, some people might look at it as kind of a downside because we have a little bit less as far as that goes, but I personally don't really mind it because the coloration given here to the Allosaurus is fantastic and it looks great on the figure, really nice and naturally applied. and again is definitely my favorite version color scheme wise of all of the Allosaurus that we've had so far, just because there is quite a bit of color to it. And then we also have again a massive upsize in the figure as a whole, much larger than any of the older Allosaurus figures, which that straight away makes it even more impressive than the older ones, and really is that kind of standout type of a figure that when you see it, you're just instantly impressed by pretty much everything when it comes to the paint, as well as the very, very large size of the figure. You have some really nice articulation. I like the action feature with the roaring aspect and the snapping jaws, and I love the extreme damage feature. I like that they kind of mix it up. They don't always give you that same sort of extreme damage feature where like you push the button and then it flips and it's an injury, and then you push it again and it flips back to the skin. I like that this one's a little bit different, and I like that from time to time Mattel does kind of mix it up a little bit when it comes to that action feature. So as a whole, this is a great release from Mattel, and one that I am extremely happy to finally have here in my collection. So if you are interested in this, make sure you check your local Walmart, because that's where my good buddy Matt found this. I definitely recommend picking this up, so make sure you do that, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.